So when we look at resilience, we can look at it really in two ways. The first is that we need to build this capacity to be able to cope with change and uncertainty. So just the sheer amount of stuff coming at us. And then when we do get knocked off our feet, because we're bound to get knocked off our feet, right? We are human, we fall over. Can we get back up on our feet? So do we have the tools, the habits, the kind of tiny daily disciplines that we need to have to build this capacity to cope? And then do we also have a toolkit to be able to get back up on our feet? And so for me, there's really 4 dimensions of this skill set, this toolkit that we need. The first is our physical skill set, and our tiny daily disciplines in terms of our capacity are things like sleep, which is, the foundation of all capacity. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's small children or barking dogs will tell you that if you don't get your sleep, you're not fit for anything. Our ability to be able to exercise, to eat, to have our physical energy is the foundation of anything. And when we get knocked off our feet, one of the best things you can do is go for a reset walk, is to move your body. So physicality is one of the primary foundations. The secondary piece that we look at is this mental capacity. And for us, from a work perspective, it's easier to go in through the mental door. Where is my focus? Where is my awareness? Do I have the ability to be able to sustain my capacity by creating boundaries in my life? Can I clock off from work? Can I create these rhythms and routines and rituals that help me to kind of separate work and life, or integrate work and life, so that I can not be overwhelmed by the amount of things that come at us? The number of, is very interestingly, apparently the Greek word priority was only in the singular before we started talking about priorities. So everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, so that kind of being able to have this mental capacity, being able to deal with things. And then when we get knocked off our feet, our ability to be able to come back to find that focus once more. And that's where meditation has really been a helpful tool for me. But it isn't necessarily the only mental tool. There's lots of kind of different ways of being able to, and these rhythms, routines, and rituals, these boundaries that we create in our life are really helpful in that regard. The third piece is the emotional skill set. And this is really based on emotional intelligence. And in, emotional intelligence, I find it hard to believe, but Daniel Goleman wrote that book 25 years ago. Yeah. Last year was the 25-year anniversary. Unbelievable, is right. And so much of it still holds true. And you can also build on the intelligences that he talked about with this emotional agility that Susan David talks about. So the agility, again, is this piece about saying, do I have the awareness of knowing what's going on inside me? Can I put words on that? Do I have the emotional granularity of vocabulary? Because most people have mad, glad, sad, and bad. And if you're Irish, Kristof, you have grand. And that covers everything, Whereas when we can know whether we're disappointed, or whether we're irritable, or whether we're furious, or whether we're, only mildly irritated, or whether we're happy or ecstatic, the more nuance that we have in terms of understanding what's going on for us emotionally, the more that we're able to give ourselves what we need in the moment, the more clarity we have around that, and the more we can move towards things that we need to be able to do. And interestingly, the emotional piece, the greatest kind of charging station that you have for your emotional energy are your friends. Very difficult in these, pandemic times, being able to plug into your charging stations if you haven't had that energy face to face. But who are those people who light you up, who fill you up, and who are the people who drag you down, and who deplete your energy? And so one of the best things that you can do when you get knocked off your feet is to talk to somebody who will have actual empathy, who's able to kind of see your pain and sit with you in your pain without trying to fix you or make you better. And so the emotional skill set, it's very interesting. We're going through a period of loneliness like we've never seen before, the disconnect we've never seen before. So Vivek Murthy, lots of people have written about loneliness. And interestingly, the depth and breadth of your social connection is the single greatest indicator of your overall well-being and happiness, more than even whether you smoke 15 cigarettes a day, apparently, which is an extraordinary thing. So emotional is a really big one. We don't necessarily always think about it from a professional perspective. But when we look at our professional networks and those people that we plug into, the network that you've created, Kristof, for instance, the resource that you have for each other, being able to plug into that that's an emotional connection as well as a mental connection, a professional connection. And then the last one is really this, what we call spiritual connection. Now, people get a bit, antsy when I talk about spiritual connection, particularly in Ireland and our history of Catholic oppression, But spiritual connection is really about, do you find meaning and purpose in your work? And all of these things together bring together the love. But there's a really interesting piece around when we look at Gen Z in particular, that this particular generation is very driven by purpose and wants to be able to do something that's going to make an impact and have meaning. And that doesn't mean that you have to be Greta Thunberg and save the world, right? But it does mean that you have to have something that for you is personally meaningful. And so for me, like helping people to find their way when they're stuck in their career, there's nothing that gives me greater joy. Seeing a leader who's able to impact everyone around them because they have that position of authority and can change people's lives is deeply meaningful for me. Being able to see teams who can work collectively together and collaboratively together to work together better and love work together really is very meaningful to me. But you need to find your own meaning and purpose, right? So that's, am I connected to something that's outside of myself? That it drives me intrinsically, but ultimately it delivers to and for others. I think a really good example of that has been through the pandemic. That when Leo Varadkar called on us all to, because we're all in it together and that we would get through it together. And that really called on that spiritual connection, that collective consciousness, that collective effervescence to try and get through. So these 4 kind of domains of resilience, and there's skill sets in each. So 2 types of skill sets in each. How do we build and sustain our capacity in each of those domains? And then what are the tools in each of those domains when we get knocked off our feet? How do we get back up again? And so that we can thrive, not just survive in ambiguity and change and uncertainty.
Well said. And all those 4 elements are so crucial, especially it reminds me, lots of people during pandemic, they lost their job or they couldn't work. And then when you think about those 4 crucial, I would say, the fundamentals of resilience, how it's important in that time.
Feel free to join our LinkedIn group. Hopefully I will see you soon. Thank you.